Hey there everybody, it's DiLisio, and today I'm going to be doing one of a series of videos where I'm covering all of the characters in Merchant's Cove. This includes the base game characters and the 3 expansion characters as well. I'm also going to talk a bit about the Secret Stash expansion. What I'm planning to do is give you a brief overview of how these characters play. Then afterwards I'll talk to you about what their level of complexity is ranked among all of the characters within the game, the main mechanisms that run those characters, and all of this is going to culminate in a video where I'm going to rank all of the Merchant's Cove characters in the order of my preference. So, without further ado, let's take a look at today's character. Alright, so let's talk about the Oracle character in Merchant's Cove. Here are the components that you'll find within this box. You've got the main player board, and this is a dry erase board because the kind of central mechanism for the Oracle character is a bit of a roll and write, or at least a kind of a riff on a roll and write. So you've got the main player board there. You've got the dry erase marker that goes along with that. Alright, you also have your sales shelf. This is just kind of for fun. You can place your goods, and there are the goods, large and small, of the 4 different colors, onto that. And then here you've got the divining dish and the 5 runes that are contained within, and these are what you're actually rolling, all right? And so you see here you've got a coin. That coin is actually 2-sided. On one side you've got a tree, the other side you've got a skull there that represents corruption. You've got that coin, you've got the voodoo doll, you've got 1 D4 there, you've got a second D4 there, and you've got a bone, all right? And these are just things that I had kind of thrown in there randomly at the beginning of this filming. Now, during setup, if you actually roll all of them into one side only of the divining dish, you can re-roll them, but that is not the case in the regular, or after you get past setup. Normally, what happens after past setup is that if they're all rolled into one side, you have to take a corruption card, all right? So that's not necessarily something you want to do. Most of the actions on the board are going to require a particular combination of runes on one side of the dish or others. So let's talk about those different actions that you can take. I do want to point out that the little figure here of Hagatha the Oracle, this one I had painted. These do not come painted, but Chris Yee's wife Wendy did a fantastic job on these, so I figured why not show those off. The ones that you get in the box are unpainted. All right, so the different actions that you can take. First of all, let's talk about this Twisting Fates area. If you come here, that's going to cost you 1 time, and depending upon what side of the face of the coin is showing, it's also going to make some determination. So in this case, as I showed you before, the corruption side is showing. So to take this action right now, since that side is showing, I would have to take a corruption card. But what you're going to do is you are going to look at which of the other runes are in that side with the coin. So in this case, the voodoo doll and 1 of the D4s are there. The bone is not in that side, so that's going to kind of determine what I can do. If I wanted to do the voodoo doll action, I can cross off 2 of the circles there. Actually, not cross off, I can fill in 2 of the circles there. And what that's going to allow me to do on a later turn is to mitigate the numbers on one of the dice, a +1 or -1. And then once you do that, this comes pre-filled with the first one, you would just mark off that you used one of those. If the coin happened to be on the side with the bone, I can mark off 2 of those move 1 circles too, that if I wanted to do that later on, I could move one of the runes, keeping its sides and numbers the same, from one side of the dish to the other. The other thing I could do is if I have wanted to use the coin, or excuse me, the D4 there with that, I can mark off an X either in the faction area or in this horoscopes area, which I'll talk about in just a moment. All right, so this is really an area that you can go to kind of mitigate the dice in some way or the runes in some way. All right, so that is Twisting Fates. The other thing that you can do is star charting, all right, and that's up here. That's going to cost you 2 time to do it. What you're going to do there is you're going to look at you have to have the bone and at least 1 of the dice in the same side like we have here. What you'll do is you will take the number that is on the die, and if there were both dice on that side, you would choose, and you are going to draw that many lines in this star charting area. So in this case, I have 4 lines to play with. That gives me a couple of options, because what you're trying to do is you are trying to enclose boxes of the different colors. So here you can see red, blue, yellow, and green. All right, that represent the different goods. So I've got 4 lines to play with. If you enclose a 1x1 square, you get a small good of the corresponding color. If you enclose a 2x1 square, you get a large good. So I have a couple options. Let's say I wanted to do this. 1, and you have to go from one dot adjacent orthogonally to another. So 1, 2, 3, 4. That would get me a filled in 2x1. I would go ahead and fill that in. I would take a large red good and place it on my sales table. However, since some of the lines I used to complete that are connected to this corruption cross, I would have to take a corruption card. Another option I could have would be like maybe I wanted a small green good instead. I can go 1, 2, 3, 4. I would get a small green good, and since I'm not connected to that corruption cross at all, I would go ahead and take that without a corruption card. All right, so this is one of the ways that you can get these goods that you are trying to sell to the customers in the next phase of the game. All right, so that is star charting. All right, another thing you can do is divination. All right, actually that's down here, sorry. Divination takes 1 hour, as you can see right there. And with divination, what you're trying to do is you are trying to kind of make a guess. You're trying to predict which customers are going to come out of the adventurer bag. And so to do the divination, you have to have the voodoo doll meeple and a die on one side, and we do. Here we've got the D4 with the voodoo meeple, and that's also showing a 4. And so what you're going to do there is you are going to count that many of these adventurer meeples. And so since this is the first turn, I would start from the left side and I'd go 1, 2, 3, 4. And I would go ahead and draw a vertical line there, all right? And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to choose one of the colors, all right? And so let's say that I'm predicting that the next adventurer that comes out of the bag is going to be a yellow customer. And you can kind of see which customers have come out. So it's not just a blind guess. You can get, you know, a little bit of an idea. And you'll cross out all of the colors that do not match that one. So if I'm doing yellow, I'd cross out the green, red, and the blue in each of these. All right, and hope that the next customer that comes out would be a yellow. You can have multiple divinations at one time, so maybe I thought the next one would be a red. I'm hoping for red too. Go ahead and mark those out. All right, and so what you're trying to do is guess correctly. So let's say that at first, the first customer that came out was not a yellow, so I'd have to say, shoot, I messed up. I mark that off. And it's also not a red, so maybe a blue or a green, so I would do that. But if on a future turn, let's say that yellow comes out next, I've got 3 yellows that are open there. That's correct. And so this is going to lead to the bonuses. So if you have 3 or more correct on a divination, you get a large good of the associated color. If you get 2 or more, then, it's actually not of the associated color, it's of any color, I'm sorry. 2 or more, you can get a small of any color, or 1 or more, you can cross off an X in the area here, which is the horoscopes area, or you can mark off a market icon in this faction area, which will give you bonuses later on, all right? The last thing to talk about here as far as actions is right here, and that is the horoscopes area. That takes 2 hours. I've talked about that a little bit in other places because there are other things that will allow you to put X's here, and I'll explain why in a moment, all right? In this area, you've got 2 separate tracks. You've got tracks that are trying to go in ascending order from small to larger, and descending order on that bottom track. And so what you're going to do for that horoscope area is you are going to choose one side of the divining dish, and for each die, write that number into the leftmost empty box. So it would be most efficient if you had both dice on one side, especially if you had some that fit both of your lines. But in this case, I'd have to choose one of these dice, both of which are a 4. So in that case, what I would do is I would likely put that in this leftmost bottom, because that would work perfectly there, because you want the larger numbers at the beginning so they can go down, all right? What the X's do, and I've said in other places you can put an X in the horoscope area, is an X is basically a wild. It allows you to kind of start over again. So if I had a 3 here, that's not great, because then the next one would have to be a 4. But if I put an X there, you can start again from the beginning and even put a 1 there. All right. So X's give you some flexibility here. The other thing that this area is going to do is it's going to give you some bonuses either above or below, depending on where which track you're talking about. So you might get a small either red or blue good there. You might get a market icon here, which again will give you bonuses later. You might be able to remove a corruption card that you have taken up. All right, so that is the horoscope area, which will allow you to gain bonuses throughout the game. All right, the last thing I did want to talk about briefly before I talk about how I feel about the Oracle character are your bonuses that you can get here, all right? And so this is for activating your staff, basically. These two icons are on all of the boards. This is gaining new townsfolk, recruiting or replacing townsfolk, and this is activating your staff ability. And this happens when you've got cards slotted above them. You can activate these abilities. So this allows you to draw an X in the horoscope or faction area. This allows you to draw 2 lines on your star chart there. All right. This, make sure that's in focus here. This allows you to fill in 2 of the Twisting Fate bubbles, either one, the move or +1, -1, and this is the same on every character. The last one is to remove a corruption. All right, well, that is the basics for the Oracle character. Let me tell you my thoughts on it. Okay, there you have the Oracle. The Oracle is the character that I'm going to be actually rating a 5 on the complexity scale. And just as a reminder, if you haven't watched any of the other videos in this series, I'm ranking all of these characters on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being least complex and 5 being most complex. But I want to make sure that it's understood that that's only within the realm of Merchant's Cove characters. So it's not a terrifically heavy game to begin with. Any of the characters are probably manageable for what I would call seasoned gamers, but within the scope of these characters, I feel like the Oracle is the most complex. It uses primarily a roll and write. Now, you're not necessarily rolling dice in a standard way. You're kind of tossing runes. 2 of those runes actually are dice, D4 dice, but you're putting them into that kind of divination bowl. That's not exactly the right terminology. The reason why I have this higher on the complexity scale is just that there's a little bit more of interaction between the actions on the board. It's not quite as straightforward as the other characters in the game are. There's more triggering of bonuses, and so it's just, there's more to track, more to keep track of, and the way that the runes work, where you essentially, each of the actions are going to depend upon a combination of runes and the side of the dish that they are on, and the different ways that you can mitigate those runes by either moving them from one side of the dish to the other or changing the value of the dice. All of those things lead to a slightly more complex character than the other ones in the game, certainly more complex than something like the blacksmith, which I rated a level of 1 on the complexity scale. So again, it's not something that I think you have to necessarily be concerned about for somebody who is a regular hobby board gamer, but it might not be the best choice as a first character for somebody. If they've played the game before and they feel comfortable with how things work, with the market phase and how the docks work and how to kind of manipulate the customers there, then they might want to go to the Oracle, because this is definitely a bit of a step up. But it might be a little bit too much for somebody the first time. Again, unless they are a well-seasoned gamer, they're used to playing heavier games, this is not going to trip them up at all. But within the scope of these characters, this is the one I would feel is the most complex. All right, well, keep watching if you want to see what I feel about all of the different characters within Merchant's Cove. This is going to be culminating in a video where I give you my ranking of preference of the Merchant's Cove characters. And that's it for me. This is Mike DiLisio signing off from Dice Tower headquarters.